When we think about segmenting our Mailchimp audience list, we usually tend to go with tags. But in some cases that I'm going to be talking about in this video, you may want to use audience fields versus tags. So let's get started. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you a working scenario in which you'd want to use an audience field. And depending on how you want to set it up, you can then have an option when someone signs up to your email list through the sign up form to have that audience field visible so anyone can select it. Or in the case of what I usually do is make it automatic, meaning customer journeys with automation. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to be showing you how to segment out this audience field. So let's go to the Mailchimp dashboard. I'm in my audience settings for my test audience. And if I scroll down here, I will see audience fields and merge tags. This is where you would add your additional audience fields. So let's click on that. And if we scroll down here, you'll see our usual suspects: email address, first name, last name. Maybe you have an address, a phone number. I have something called newsletter status. And in newsletter status, I have three options that are radio buttons, not check marks. In those radio button options, I have weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And I did it as an audience field because if I did it as a tag, if a person were to click a link in an email that says, yes, I'd like to receive them weekly, and then they go back 3 weeks later into that email, it said, where was that email where I could change what status I wanted to be for the newsletter? I want to go back in and click monthly. Well, now I've got two tags applied to that contact. I've got weekly and monthly. Now, this can be a huge, cumbersome system process that you would have to go in and filter out through automation, perhaps. It gets very complicated very quickly. In those type of situations, I would suggest that you start using audience fields. So let's take this scenario a little further along here. I've got my audience field here for newsletter status. How do I get the contact to select their newsletter status? Well, I could just simply go up under the visible tab and make this visible to anyone who signs up on my form. And then in their preferences, if they want to make changes, they click on the preferences link at the bottom of your emails and it'll have this option, newsletter status. So they can go in and change it at any time. But I like to do it behind the scenes and add in some automation. So I'm going to uncheck that. I want to do it through an email. And in my email, which we have right here, so it says here, welcome to the club, and it's just a simple, informal welcome email. But I have three choices at the bottom, and it says, how often do you want to receive our newsletter? Weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And depending on which one they click, it will activate or trigger an automation in customer journeys. So let's go over to the customer journeys. And so we have here three different journeys: quarterly, monthly, and weekly. Well, let's go into weekly, pause it, then we can go in and take a look at how this is set up. And they're all similar. So our welcome email is called updating custom field. I know that's not very intuitive, and our URL that's specific when they click on it is weekly. Now, in this case, it's just a thank you, but you get the idea. So that's our starting point. Also note that if a contact were to go back into this email and select, hey, I want to change it to monthly, to quarterly, or weekly, that in the customer journey, the contact would have to repeat the journey. So make sure that this is ticked on. If that were to occur, then go ahead and update that audience field to weekly. Make sense? Also note that I do have filters in here, because if it is already weekly, then there's nothing to do. If it is not weekly, in other words, if it's blank or it's quarterly or monthly, then go ahead, allow them to go to the next step, which is to update that audience field. Let me turn that back on. So each one of these is referencing that audience field, those radio buttons that says if they click on a specific link, in other words, quarterly, monthly, or weekly, in this email, then go ahead and update that audience field. And just to show you, so I've got one person here with a quarterly status and a weekly status. If I go into the email address that is now designated quarterly and I want to change my mind at any time, I can go and click on, in the email, I'll click on monthly, and it will take me to a specific URL. In this case, it just says your subscription has been set up successfully. This is just to give you an example. In the customer journey, it will then go and do that check. It will say, oh, is this audience field blank, or it is not already monthly? Then go ahead and update that audience field to monthly. So what we'll see under the monthly status here, eventually we'll see that it will say started, in progress, and completed. And so this is going through the process through the Mailchimp servers. It's nothing that you can control, but it will take a few minutes to complete. Now you notice here that it did actually start. So we have a started for in progress 1. So that is going on. And eventually what we'll see in our subscribers list is that the email associated that was once quarterly will now be monthly. And there you go. The newsletter status has now been changed from quarterly, where it was, to now monthly. And I didn't have to do anything manually to make that happen. And that's why I like the power of Mailchimp's automation through customer journeys and the power of using audience fields versus tags. To set up segments, we can click on New Segment, and we're going to click in where it says Subscription Status, going to scroll up to our Newsletter Status, and we're going to select Is Weekly. We're going to preview this segment, and then we're going to make sure that we have our weekly person in here and click on Save Segment. We're going to call this segment Weekly Newsletter. I click Save. We're going to exit out of that and do that for the other 2 segments, monthly and quarterly. So if we go over to our segments, we'll see here that we have quarterly, monthly, and weekly, the way that we created them. And if we were to create a email campaign, we'd be able to select this segment. So we go to Create up here in the top left, click on Regular Email, and under the To field, we'll click on Add Recipients. We'll select Choose an Audience. We'll do our test audience. And for the recipients, we will select our newly created segment. We can only select one segment at a time. So let's do weekly and click Save. We know at this point, it's only going to go to one recipient. And from there, we fill this out, we schedule it, and it would go off as an email to that segment that in this case is weekly. If you'd like to learn more about Mailchimp customer journeys, click this link right here or that link right there. If you have any more questions, post them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.